This week's news was dominated by Apple and the Worldwide Developers Conference, which kind of surprised us with a few big announcements in both software and hardware. While social media is still buzzing over the design of that beastly Mac Pro, calling it things like a cheese grater, we found ourselves impressed by some new functionality added to the iPad Pro. But underneath all of these fun announcements was a declaration of safety, a declaration that users and developers alike can take a better stance toward data privacy. The headliner? Sign On with Apple, a single sign-on apparatus that creates aliases per app so you don't have to give your actual email address to any of the apps that might be accessing your data. With the conversation around privacy coming to the forefront, I sit down with Brandon Miniman and TK Bay to discuss the state of privacy on the internet and in our own lives. Support for the Pocketnow Weekly podcast comes from Oregon State University. Earn your Oregon State MBA 100% online in a program that's designed to help you move up or make a career change. You can choose from specialized tracks in organizational leadership, business analytics, marketing, or supply chain and logistics management. Get where you're going faster with the Oregon State MBA. Learn more at mba.oregonstate.edu/pocketnow. Hello everybody and welcome to The Weekly, brought to you by Pocketnow and XDA Developers, episode 361, recorded on June 3rd, 2019. YouTube viewers, you are enjoying the highlights of the show, after which we invite you to join in on the full conversation regarding Apple's announcements and their stance on privacy. In between those two main segments, we also ask the panel, what is in your pocket now? So let's get into the show. We begin with some thoughts on Apple's keynote, WWDC. I saw people on Twitter going like, yeah, it's my first time at DubDub. And I was like, who calls it that? Why are you calling it that? It's WWDC. And I think it was really funny how on stage, none of the people actually used the words iTunes is dead. But let's be real. iTunes is practically dead by now, right?
To a certain extent, yeah. We've seen the purification, basically the different versions of the software now that will manage different parts of the OS, or well, not the OS, the libraries, right? So you have your video library, your podcast library, and content. So
what's super interesting about iTunes is that it was built for a world of the past where your computer was the server. It contained all the data. You didn't have a super fast internet connection. There really was no cloud because storage was still very expensive and it had to be local on your computer. But now your movies, your music, all of your data exists on another computer somewhere. It's streamed, it's downloaded. We're moving past that to a decentralized, cloud-based existence. I mean, it's been happening for a while, and I'm glad that Apple has finally gotten on board, because iTunes has been a mess for a very long time.
But it's the backup and restore that always worry me, because that's where a lot of people, let's say you lose your iPhone or your iPod Touch, the brand new one, but if you have a backup, your data is at least there, you can restore it to a new phone.
Yeah, indeed.
So, yeah.
You're talking about data redundancy, because like if you take your phone and you do an iCloud backup and then you throw it in the toilet and flush it down the toilet, and then you go out and buy another iPhone, you log into iCloud and it says, today you backed up your...
If your iCloud storage limit hasn't been reached.
Exactly.
Yes.
You're going to get like a third of your pictures back. I was actually really excited about all the iPad stuff. I don't know what your guys' thoughts were on the tablet side of things.
I think what people wanted was a closer experience to almost like a touch-friendly Mac OS. And I think that's kind of what people thought that the iPad operating system was going to be if you go back to 2010. And so I think iPad OS is such like it's better, it's improved, but it's really a half measure. It's still a blown-up phone operating system with a little bit more.
It would have been Jaime's class at like, oh my god, are you kidding? Yeah, this was the best part of the show, and like he's like so happy because he's such a big iPad advocate.
Why are people so obsessed with dark mode? Can somebody explain that to me?
That is kind of a good question.
It's a good segue to me, because that's exactly what I was excited about.
Exactly.
So dark mode, for the most part, if nothing else, especially on AMOLED displays, saves you battery, if nothing else. But for aesthetics and for reading at night, it still also looks a little bit cooler. It's also the first time we've ever seen a theme type of situation come straight from Apple.
Speaking of the audience kind of going crazy over an announcement, there is one that kind of floored everybody. And I like the way that Tim Cook actually announced it. And he said there's one category that we have yet to fill in our computing segment, and that is, of course, the Mac Pro.
So a device like this will allow people to film at 16K and crop in at 8K. And you need a lot of power. You need 4 GPUs and 28 processing cores and a terabyte of RAM to be able to handle so many pixels moving on the screen. It's going to be awesome.
Oh, and the monitor stand is $1,000.
Yeah. No. And imagine if you order the monitor and then the stand is in back order.
Oh my gosh.
And you get a $5,000 monitor and you're looking at it, it's like, hey, it looks great on the floor.
Our conversation today around privacy actually has a special sponsor, Hackable, an original podcast from McAfee. From the news to episodes of Black Mirror, stories about cybercrime are all over the place. If you're concerned about your personal devices like your webcam or your voice assistant spilling your secrets, Hackable looks to answer those questions and more. Each episode, found on all major podcast platforms, has Hackable host Jeff Siskin inviting a white hat hacker to try and hack a device he's using. And in Season 4, you can see if these show-friendly hackers can crack smartphones, printers, even smart kettles. Learn if the internet-connected essentials that power your life also leave your personal data vulnerable. And then learn how to protect yourself from letting your love of devices put you at risk. Listen and subscribe to Hackable today on all major podcast platforms, including Apple and Stitcher. So I wanted to throw to you guys about privacy, and in particular, this new feature called Sign On with Apple.
I realize that it's something that we can all do if you decide to run your own mail server, but not everybody will run their own mail server if they're not running a website or so on. But just the ability of not having your own personal email, getting bombarded with emails, getting information, you could just basically put it in. I'm hoping they implement it and it works as simply as they're saying it, because the reality is, again, it all relies on the end user's experience once it comes out. How do you change the proxy once you're basically done with it? And how do you know where it's coming from in a sense of what account? If it's sold and you're starting to get spam on it, does it just all come into one inbox? That whole process, I always worry about the details, but in theory, I think it's a good idea.
And for every story of a breach, there's also stories of companies trying to make it so that you have control over your data.
If somebody got a hold of which podcasts I listen to, like, fine, it's boring, I don't care. But like, when it comes to other more private things, like the photos I take or the emails I send or the text messages I send, privacy is obviously very important. Private from what? Who? You guys? Yeah, I don't want you guys to see my emails and pictures. Private from a stranger who's trying to get my identity? Yeah, definitely don't want that. So with privacy, it's like, the question is, privacy from whom?
Do you actually dive into the Android privacy settings and all of the permissions and whatnot?
So as far as just the ability of controlling the information access per application, we've been doing it ever since Expose. With back in the day, where one of the reasons we needed to root our device was to be able to install Expose and install xPrivacy in there. It was a module in there that allowed us, it's one of those things that you should see what applications are asking for, and you should really address the fact that why does it need access to your camera when it's just a text messaging application and it doesn't actually do anything.
Some apps use location data in the background and it's creepy and it kills your battery. Like, I think like the weirdest apps, like a library app or something that you have, or Starbucks app, like it's constantly pulling the background so that maybe it can present you with, oh, there's a Starbucks nearby, you should, I don't know, patronize it. And it's killing your battery, and it's fantastic to have as much granular control as possible to see what apps are doing and to question, why does my library app need my location? I'm deleting it.
Yeah, but I don't think I use two-factor authentication a whole lot. Do you guys use that?
Yeah, no, I have two-factor on all my Gmail accounts and anything that I can, even my Fortnite account. My Epic Game account. I have two-factor.
Isn't that required though? Doesn't Epic require that?
It's an option.
Okay.
For the regular person that buys a phone and uses it for 2 years, since we're very abnormal, it's a no-brainer. It adds an additional layer of security that makes it physically impossible in a lot of cases, but not all, for someone to take over your account because they don't have that second part. They have their username and password, but it's like a second password on top of that. So It can really save your butt in a lot of situations.
I think you guys have convinced me, because I think the only place that I've ever used 2FA has been with my Blizzard account. Back when I used to play Overwatch a lot. Thank you so much for watching the highlights of this episode of the Pocketnow Weekly. We really encourage you to listen to the full discussion as we talk about a lot of stuff on this episode, so get into the link in the description down below to open up the podcast in your favorite podcasting app. And with that, we're going to call it on this one. Thank you so much for listening or watching, and we will be seeing you again next week.